Creator, thank you. Thank you for my life today. Please allow me to keep in perspective what's actually important. Please allow me to be out of my own way. And remember that the most important thing about what we're doing here is the message, and it's not the technology or the recording. Although it is important because that'll transcend and bring more hope to people longer. Just give me the strength and calmness to just settle in and sit and be present right now, right here. I ask, Creator, that you just give me the grace that you provide me. And I just want to thank you, Creator, for allowing our friends to be present on the Zoom and in person. And I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of their journey and then be a part of mine. Creator, I'm just so grateful for my life today and to be able to do this. And thank you. Hi.
God, thank you for the opportunity to get together tonight and to learn together and to connect on our busy schedules and to come together. And if you can't get here, to be online and to join us in that way. Be with those who are grieving right now. There seems to be a lot of people that are really going through some significant loss, and so give special strength to the people who are supporting each other through that, and that we're able to be sober and we're able to support people in ways that we weren't able to when we were in addiction. And thank you for our families as we come together over the holidays, and for our families that may not be our blood families, but that, you know, when we're in recovery, we're not alone and we don't have to be alone. There's always somewhere that we can go, and thank you for, you know, letting me find the solution, because a lot of people don't find the solution. And I feel really grateful and really lucky. And some days I feel a sense of a survivor's guilt of some sort, because I don't understand why some get it and some don't. And so help me to never lose the feeling of the gratefulness that I have the solution and that I can spread the message and not to take that for granted. Amen.
Okay. We're going to get right into it. So doctor's opinion, we're just going to quickly blast off the rest of this doctor's opinion. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, "Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me." Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it is often not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. So I just want to touch on that. So one feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. So early in the doctor's opinion, on page XXVII, when the doctors realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was urgent importance, but they couldn't figure out how to do the mental rearrangement, right? And it said we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside of their synthetic knowledge. So they knew something needed to be done, but they didn't have the way to get this done. So basically what he's saying here is the same thing. One feels that something more than human power. The doctor's seen Bill W. doing this, and he sees that something more is required to produce the essential psychic change. And when you really understand step six is really where it describes the psychic change, right? It talks about any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults has indeed come a long way spiritually. So if I'm willing to try repeatedly on all my faults without reservation and I bring God into all these character flaws, my distorted thinking, my judgments, my resentments, all these kind of things, then God gives me the power to change my perspective on these things, and I rewire myself, right? And that's what he's kind of alluding to. And that's kind of what that step 3 prayer is talking about. That's what the step 6 is talking about. That's what step 10 is talking about. And then what I also love here, although he gives all that is in him, these doctors give everything to us, right? But it's often not enough. It's often not enough. Earlier in that chapter, it talked about we have found nothing that has contributed more to the rehabilitation to these men than this altruistic movement now growing up among them. Like the God and the processes through this program are what rewire our brain, is what actually heals us. It's really a program of healing. It's not just a program of not drinking. Through everything that we do, through you bringing God in, and God is love. Love is what heals everything, right? It takes time, but that's what we're talking about. And then another really important thing that people miss is on this paragraph a little further down. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable. What that means is the aggregate means combined. So they're taking all of these psychological, psychiatry, counselor, mental type of things that doctors use of recoveries is considerable. So you bring all that together, it's considerable. They got a lot of information out of mental health experts studying us, right? But we physicians must admit that we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. We alcoholic types do not usually respond to that type of approach. And I could, I bet there's a lot of people in here that have went to the psychiatrist, psychologist, the doctors, and tried every imaginable remedy. But when you came here and you started using God, you started getting like real results. And it kind of boils down to this. You can't change your sick mind with your sick mind, right? The doctors are the power that you're relying on. And then you're left to your own. But now when you come here to these fellowship programs, you have another power that you might not trust yet, but that's the power, man. That power actually has the power to change me on the inside. And through using it and starting it at a beginning point, you build some faith, right? To the point where you're into trust. Janine, do you want to speak on any of that since you're a mental health expert?
I would like to get through the doctor's opinion, but I'll save my points till the end. You keep going.
Okay. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months or some problem business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink, or they took the drink a day or so prior to the date, and the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a physical craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the same supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. So just quickly on that, once you take the first drink, okay, you're no longer drinking to escape life like you might have when you put it in your body. You are now drinking to overcome that physical craving that now takes over beyond your mental control, which is why you can't put it down. Which is why when you fall asleep and you wake up the next day, you're picking it up against your will, whether it's drugs or alcohol, because now the allergy is set off and it's done with you when it's done with you. You don't have a power of choice in this deal, okay? And I love this. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue the fight. The supreme sacrifice is death. It's suicide. And there's so many people that kill themselves with this illness because they don't know what's wrong with them. They can't not drink or use drugs, but they can't not do it either, right? They're screwed if they do, and they're screwed if they don't. And they don't know what's wrong with them. And a lot of these people, like, you know, I hear it all the time. I made bad choices. I make bad choices. Oh, I slipped the other day and I made a bad choice. And you keep telling yourself you're making the choice. You create so much shame and guilt within you because you're affecting other people and yourself. You don't have the power of fucking choice. We got to make sure people understand that you are not making the fucking choice. If you live in the restless, irritable discontentment, that makes the choice for you against your will. And you pick it up because as we succumb to the desire again, we fail to resist. We don't have the power of choice, but the mind looks like it does. It thinks it does. But when you've crossed the line as an alcoholic addict, you do not have that power of choice. And then you put it in your body and all bets are off. That's why so many people kill themselves. And a lot of people in the program end up killing themselves and drinking again because they don't understand the full implication of the spiritual malady part of the disease. Because all the rooms we go to just say, just don't drink, just don't drink. Oh, you got 1 year, we pat them on the ass and say, good job, you're on your way, keep going. And I always say, yeah, they're on their way. They're on their way to a relapse. And most people don't make it 2 years. And if they do make it 2 years, a lot of them are pretty crazy, man. And then they're seeking schooling and jobs and relationships and just trying to grasp at things to make themselves happy. But you got to get good on the inside. Once you get good on the inside by discovering what this malady is, then you can work on that solution, and then you can get good on the outside, right?
I guess I will add that the powerlessness that's always mentioned, I think that I mostly hear people talking about it in a way that once a person starts drinking, they're powerless, and then they keep drinking because of the phenomenon of the craving. But really the powerlessness isn't it's not when you're drinking either. It's when you're sober. You're saying, I'm powerless against alcohol. When I'm sober, I will continue to drink. I will continue to drink every single time because I'm powerless. I have no defense against the first drink, the book says. Like it's not talking about I'm powerless once I start drinking. It's I'm powerless against the first drink. And the defense has to come from a higher power. So there's no human power. It's not found in the doctors or the relationships. All that shit, I feel like it's prolonged. For me, when I think of my own, journey with this shit, I think the education and the relationships and the attainment of, material stuff prolonged the inevitable. And I think that I caused myself a lot of misery. And at some point I crossed a line that I couldn't stop drinking. I was always alcoholic, and I drank in a way that was very different than other people, but I was able to use other things to get better. So I was able to use the relationship. I was able to use the job. I was able to use, goals, exercise, whatever it was. And I could do that for a little bit until I couldn't anymore. And it took a long time for me to hit that bottom because I kept using other things as a higher power. So the bottom line is that the powerlessness is in me as a person, as an alcoholic. If I don't have God as a higher power, that's where the defense against the first drink comes from. I'm powerless when I'm sober. If I don't have a connection to a higher power, I'll get drunk again and again and again. So the defense has to come from God. Yeah.
So Janine makes great points. And later in the We Agnostics chapter, it talks about if when you honestly want to, you cannot stop drinking entirely, have you tried to stop? Or while drinking, you have little control of the amount you take, you are probably an alcoholic, of which only a spiritual experience can conquer. So it's saying exactly what she's talking about. Have you tried to quit, but haven't been able to? Because you're powerless, even though you can get some time in, eventually you pick up again. Or while drinking, the allergy, you have little control of the amount you take. Both, there's two powerlessnesses. And that's really important to know. Most people just think the powerlessness is once you put it in your body. No, the first powerlessness and the most important one is the one that you pick up the drink sober. And if you're able to not pick up the drink, but not work with a good relationship with God, like we said, you will seek relationships, jobs, you'll seek anything. You will wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world and try to get happy by managing your life well and just getting everything in order. But the suffering of that is acute and it's constant and it never lets up. There's little periods of relief in your life, but then the restless, irritable, discontented is on you again. And then, you know, suicide looks like a good option to lots of sober alcoholics, right? Lots of them won't do it if they got kids and shit, but some will.
Also, I think coming out of treatment, there was a couple of lanes I saw going on. There was people that were going to meetings and were really trying to work the steps. And I started noticing that there was a bit of a difference in, like, I could see there was some calmness in them and that there was some enthusiastic attitude around the program. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to a meeting. There was like the two streams, and the other people that were staying sober were back to the business of being self-satisfied, where, like, you know, you get your license back and you get your job back and you get your kids back and your family's like, you know, welcoming you back as a sober person, and all these things feel like the gifts of God. Like, oh, God is just so good, and God is, you know, my recovery is going so well, and not really putting the faith in where we need to put it in, like the step 6 stuff that he's talking about, where, you know, like, you got to get uncomfortable a little bit, because if a person goes back to their old zone, the comfort zone, and things haven't changed, nothing's actually really changed. You've just achieved a bunch of things, and that doesn't keep a person sober. And so I remember early on, Bill was telling me, you know, the shelf life of a alcoholic that does that is, you know, 8 to 16 months. And I was like, and then it was 8 to 16 months. I started seeing a lot of people kind of dropping off, and the biggest thing that I recommend to people that I've done for myself is, like, I just did not get into relationships. And I believed Bill and other people that were like, this will really mangle up your recovery. And I see how, you know, looking back, it's like getting into a relationship is, I did it out of treatment very briefly. And it was like, how on earth was I supposed to form a healthy relationship when I didn't know who I really was? I didn't discover who I really was till I was doing step 6 through step 10 and kind of figuring that out. When I moved myself away from the defects and I was doing these different things, I'm like, geez, this is who I really am. Okay. Like, I had no idea who I was. So to form a healthy relationship with somebody while I'm trying to figure out who I am, and then they're figuring out who they are, their own recovery, like, it's total nonsense. And like the what I see happening is, like, these relationships have the same kind of shelf life as, you know, the 8 to 16 months, and then people don't make it out of that zone very often, because the newness and the novelty of the relationship wears off, and the pink cloud of the relationship wears off, and just like it does for the pink cloud of recovery, if you're not actually working the steps, it dies off, and then you're left with the reality of life, the reality of the relationship, that two broken people were coming together with a Band-Aid situation, and that's not sustainable. And yeah, so if I could recommend anything, I do recommend this, is to, like, try your best to stay out of relationships until you have a really good understanding of who you are. And that, to me, like, for me, that's only just happened like within lately. Like, it was around a year where I started to even understand what I like to do, and what are my real hobbies, and what are my real opinions. And I was always, like, comfortable talking in front of people, and I thought that I was authentic, but I see now that I didn't really know my own truth. So I was talking a lot, but I don't know if I knew what my authentic self was in the same way that I do now. And now I have a discernment where, like being sober and being alone, and having to rely on God instead of a human power, has given me the ability now to discern. Like, if somebody asks me out, I can be like, you know, like, I don't think that that's something I want to settle for. You know, I know the kinds of things that I want to do through my sex ideals, and I can stand by that, because I feel like I've put myself back together in enough of a way that I can be okay alone. So I don't have to take this because I'm lonely, or take this because I feel bad and I'm people pleasing, or so all these things have changed for me. And like, I've never, ever been comfortable being by myself. I've always like either had loneliness take me down, or I've like had fear of like the end of the world. It used to be a thing, and I didn't want to be alone for that. And there's all kinds of silly things that would get me into relationships and keep me into relationships. People pleasing was a huge one. So I think that that's been like the biggest thing for me in getting the type of like recovery that I wanted. I think the biggest thing has been being able to be by myself and just trusting that if I did the things off my sex ideals, and it was like, if I'm going to message someone when I'm bored or lonely, what would I do instead? I will call my sponsor. I will work with others. I will hang out with my kids, whatever. And I did that for a period of time. And all those little moments added up to me suddenly being okay with myself. And I never thought that recovery could be like that. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know how I got onto relationships with that, but.
Awesome. Okay, let's keep going. And we will be touching what she talked about many times throughout this study. Okay, the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. So there's different types of alcoholics it goes through here. But I'm just going to tell you, it doesn't fucking matter. None of this matters. But when I work with people, they're always like, oh, which one am I? Which one am I? Doesn't matter. But let's read it anyway. I don't even know why they put this in here. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over remorseful, make many resolutions, but never a decision. There's the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There's the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There's the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there are the types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They're often able, intelligent, and friendly people. All these and many others have one symptom in common. This is all that matters. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. That's the only thing that really matters. All of the types don't matter. If you go through the step 1 literature, the first like 4 chapters, including the doctor's opinion, which isn't actually a chapter, you'll know what you are. And hopefully you're tuning into the spiritual malady part of this program. Okay. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. That's really important. You have to, like step 2, right? Came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, could restore us to sanity. You have to come to believe that you're separate and you're a distinct entity. You are not the same as a normal average tempered drinker. You don't have the biology the same anymore as a normal person. And understanding that and going, okay, I am different. I am different. And I can never safely use drugs or alcohol in any form ever again. Even at the doctor's, when I need painkillers, I got to be careful. Like these kind of things. That'll set off the allergy, and then the sprees are coming again, right? So it's really important to understand we're a distinct entity. And step 1, all of the chapters of step 1 really describe that in a good way.
I'm just going to say my 2 cents on this. And when I read this, I think of like the doctors at this hospital are sitting around and they're conferencing. They're doing their doctor thing, and they're like, this guy's like, he's like those guys, you know, that he's quitting and then he feels really bad. I think he really does feel really bad. So I don't know why he's, you know. Then there's this guy he's always on the wagon, and and it's like, to me, it's like conversations doctors have had, just like we've gotten labels over the years and a DSM with it. This is like the beginning of the DSM, you know, there's these types, and then there's this type, and then there's that type. And it's just, I think when I read it, it's just a way that the doctors have been talking amongst each other, trying to sort out like, what is with this alcoholism? And like, I view it also as a bit of a warning and also something to pay attention to when you're working with others. Like, you're going to have these types of people, and like a manic depressive type is going to be probably out of your realm of what you can advise and what you can maybe tell that person to go for some outside help, because this whole chapter, it's going to be really complicated. Or you're going to find somebody who's not going to believe you that they can't take a drink over and over. They'll keep going, oh, I remember, that's a type. And so I think it's more like, I don't know, this guy processing the types of alcoholics. He's like, I don't know. But to me, that's what I get when I read it. And that's what I talk about with people when I go through this part of the book.
Fuck, that was amazing. Thanks. I had no idea. I just thought it was useless information, but you made good sense of that.
You're welcome. I wasn't going to say anything. And then he's like, I don't know why they wrote this part. I'm like, oh, I guess. Are you kind of asking? I guess I'll kind of tell you. My take on it.
Okay, no, that was amazing. And that's, you know, I think as we start sponsoring, that stuff's kind of important. Like, you got to identify, like, hopefully you're working with people that are like you at first. And I always find creator will bring you the people that are broken in the same place as you're broken. And then as you're working with them, it's like, whoa, they're just like me, right? But if you sponsor long enough and you sponsor enough people, you're going to come across all types. And learning how to navigate all the different types is really important, because you'll get, if you're the real egocentric alcoholic, you're going to get pissed at the depressives, right? Because they don't operate the same. But it teaches you a lot of like really, you know, in-depth processes and patience and a whole bunch of things, right? And if you're the depressive, you don't want to work with an egocentric. But if you keep doing it, that's where the healing happens, right? That's where the compassion's built. That's where the love actually is for the other person and for yourself. And it comes over time. Okay. It has never been by any treatment which we're familiar permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Okay, abstinence is the solution. The problem is that we're powerless over abstinence, which is why we need God, right? We can't just be abstinent, because we will succumb to the desire. We'll fail to resist. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About a year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life, was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed for him that there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan, the detailed proposal to achieve a goal outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger. So he's just describing the psychic change from a despairing, nervous wreck who probably couldn't even look anyone in the eye to this man who is shining and glowing and, you know, brimming over with self-confidence. And the guy's like, dude, I don't even know you. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a search party and in desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment was a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex, his depression was so great, that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. And we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is a fine specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. Dr. William D. Silkworth.
So when I go through this with people, I talk like those two cases are really, I always think of like, what was he trying to get at? Like everything's put in here so intentionally. So I really look at like, what was he really doing here? And the first one I realized when I broke that one down, it's like, this guy was at the end of the rope. You know, he had all the physical things going on. By the time that he was, you know, getting under the doctor's care here, he had the stomach problems were going on, and they thought that he probably had something like Korsakoff. But once they removed the alcohol, he'd lost everything, you know, and his physical health was right on the wire to the point that they thought that he had, you know, permanent brain damage. But they removed the alcohol, and, you know, I think there was probably some detox in here, and then he outlined the plan in the book, and the guy accepted it. And then a year later, so to me, that's like, it doesn't take a long time to go from a state of like, this guy was at hell's gates physically, hell's gates mentally, like it looked like brain damage. He had lost everything. And only a year later, he's brimming with confidence, and he's like, so it doesn't take a long time. So this is like, to me, this is like a message of hope to somebody if you're working with them and they seem like they've fallen so far down that it's like, but look at this guy. He had all the physical problems, all the mental problems, and he had lost everything. And only a year later, he presents and this doctor doesn't even know him. So to me, that's like the most amount of hope that you can possibly have here. This guy was at the wire in all ways. And then the second one, you've got a guy who all he wants is this willpower so that he doesn't have to drink. That's all he's asking for. And then the doctor says, okay, well, do the steps, whatever. So he does the steps, and then he finds he doesn't even need the willpower. The steps gave him something so much more than that. So it's not like he's white knuckling it and he's got to use willpower. The obsession to drink was removed, and he's a free man. And so those are two very these are extreme cases of what we want so badly, and it doesn't have to take a long time, and we're not going to be white knuckling it.
Awesome. Okay, so that's the end of the doctor's opinion. Okay, we're gonna get going. There's a solution, chapter 2. So just a little intro on this chapter. So doctor's opinion is about the allergy, primarily the allergy. There's a solution chapter really accentuates the hopeless nature of the illness. It's about really showing you how much we need, like the rest of the steps, or how much we need God, right? And really trying to show you the hopeless feature of this disease. And then the other chapter, that's part of step 1, is more about alcoholism. That chapter shows you about the thinking that precedes the first drink, what type of thoughts go through our mind. A lot of people don't really know that these chapters are very significant in what they're trying to teach you, but we will do that as we go through this. We don't do Bill's story. I don't do Bill's story when I sponsor somebody right off the bat. I like to do Bill's story at the end of the big book study because it ties all of the program together. Hopefully we can do that in the time limit that we have to do the study. If anyone's wondering why we're not doing Bill's story, that's why. Because all of step 1, all of the steps are in Bill's story. So we'll tie that in that. Okay, let's go.
Do you want me to read?
First page, yeah. Just first page though.
Okay. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally wouldn't mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We are like the passengers of a great liner, the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to the captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in the escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element of the powerful cement that binds us, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. The tremendous fact for every one of us that we have discovered a common solution. We have found a way on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism.
Okay, I'll go first. So just, it's just talking about we are people who would normally not mix, right? There exists among us a fellowship of friendliness and understanding, which is indescribably wonderful. That's just being an alcoholic and an addict. You're an alcoholic addict. I'm an alcoholic addict. When we first came to the programs, we really got some value out of that, right? Hearing other people sharing our story and like knowing that we're not alone, right? That knowing that you're not alone was really important when we first get here. But it also talks about joyousness, democracy, camaraderie, from vestige to steerage to captain's table. Steerage is the bottom of a boat. So steerage is the bottom of a boat. On the Titanic, that's where all the poor people were. Captain's table was at the top. So everybody in between, from the rich to the poorest, everybody is afflicted with alcoholism if you're an alcoholic. Doesn't matter who you are, and the disease doesn't really care who you are. Okay, so that's important. But that's tradition 3. If you have a desire not to drink, you're welcome. You're welcome, right? If you have a desire not to use, you're welcome in the program. But as we go down, but that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Just being an alcoholic and having that camaraderie isn't enough. That's one element in the powerful cement that binds us. The tremendous fact for every one of us that we had discovered a common solution. We have a way out which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. And that's an important line. This is the great news. The news is joining in brotherly and harmonious action. The principle behind step 8 is brotherly love. Like really accepting and getting along with your brother and loving your brother and packing into the stream of life harmonious action. And as we suffer from selfish self-centeredness, that is not actually what happens if we don't work the steps. We're not brotherly and harmonious if we're not work the steps. So what I want to highlight here is there's 2 fellowships, okay? There's the fellowship of tradition 3, which is what the mass of the program is actually. Everyone's an alcoholic addict and we join in that. But there's another fellowship here, the one that we join in brotherly and harmonious action. And I want you to flip to page 164 quickly just to point that out. 164. The last paragraph on page 164. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. So as you look at that prayer or that segment of the big book, it's the very last paragraph out of the first 164 pages, which is the solution to our lives. It talks about abandoning yourself to God, which is your step 3, like surrendering that initial part of your life when you get to step 3. Admitting your faults to him and your fellows, step 4 and 5. Clearing away the wreckage of your past, step 6, 7, 8, and 9, essentially. And give freely of what you find and join us. Giving freely of this in your 12th step and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of God, the fellowship of the Spirit. And it says you will surely meet some people, some of us, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Not everyone's working in the fellowship of the Spirit. Not everyone's working in the fellowship of God. So that's a small fellowship. Okay, and that's important to know. And it talks about trudging the road of happy destiny. Trudging in 1939, when you look that up, it means walking with purpose. Doesn't mean walking up to your neck with problems. If you're walking up to your neck in problems still, and you're 12-stepped and you've worked this program, something's missing. You should be walking with purpose. And the book tells me in step 9, our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the fellows about us. But Bill W. is smart. He starts out with our greatest deficit, me as an alcoholic addict, and all my terrible experiences. I can use that as an asset to help another person out. So as I start that process of sharing my experiences of my debauchery and all of the terrible things that have happened to me or that I've done, I can now use that to build compassion for my fellow human being. And down the road, I can practice this in all of my affairs. And I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows, no matter who they are, outside of the program. May God bless you and keep you until then. That's kind of like a warning. May God bless you and keep you until then. Until what? You find the fellowship of the Spirit. That's important, okay? That's all. Go ahead, Brandon.
I could probably comment on a lot of things, but for me, that's my favorite 2 paragraphs on page 164 in the whole thing. And it's resonated with me my entire 20-something years of recovery. But for me, those capitalized words in here are something. And on that particular paragraph that you just read, there's a solution bill. There's a particular capitalized word that drew my attention today that it hasn't drawn before, and that's captain statement. So when I look at this room and the rooms of this program, it allows me to hear different perspectives from different life experiences from people from different cultures. And that allows me, if I walk into this room open-minded enough to hear something that I might want to adopt and experiment with in my own mind and in my own life. Okay? And that allows me, it allows us as a group to cooperate in this vessel-like experience of from steerage to captain's table, wherever we're at. But the part that just clicked for me is it allows us to move from steerage to captain's table. Okay, that capitalized C says something to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the fellowship of the Spirit being capitalized,
Mm-hmm.
says something.
That was amazing, bro.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
I was going to add to what Bill said there, that I don't think it's the absence of problems. I think that life is a series of problems, and it's difficult. Life is difficult, and it's, you know, how do you come to your problems? And I think that, you know, I get the best sense of how we're supposed to come to that from step 10 in the 12 by 12, where they talk about the acid test, where being sober is like the beginning. And then it says, but can I be sober and keep an emotional balance and be helpful to everybody in all situations? And that's the acid test. So it's like, everybody has problems, but like, I know with working with others, where when I first meet them, it's like the problems are the problems, and it's like, problems, all these things, and there is no emotional balance at all. And it's just like the problem, reaction, more problem, the reaction, and you know, the insanity of self, really. And so over time, as a person keeps doing the stuff and doing the steps and turning over whatever they can at any point, all the time, whenever they can, and they remember, and they slowly start to give themselves back to their defects, back to God, and be restored. And the emotional balance is the evidence of that. And so the problems come, but the emotions stay in check, and it's an appropriate reaction, because the goal is not to have any emotion. The goal is to have an appropriate emotional reaction to the situation, and to have, because we're supposed to have emotion. We're supposed to feel all those things. And in a lot of ways, that's how we connect, and that's how we experience life. but it's like these blown out of proportion ego emotions that get in the way of our ability to be helpful, for one thing, but also just our ability to actually experience life as it should be unfolding and experienced. And so as a person recovers, and what I see, and I really see it in other people, because when I first meet them and start working with them, it's like the emotional balance isn't there. But then, you know, even a month or two down the road and something really big happens, and they're able to come to it with like sanity, and it is sad and it is painful and there is uncertainty and there's some anxiety in there, but the emotions are in display to it, and the ability to pause and to be able to just wait and not do anything. So there's no reaction. It's like you have the emotional experience. There's some time and space that'll pause, pray, proceed thing can be applied for real. And then in that, you're able to then be helpful in that situation, because we blow it when our emotions we're not helpful to anybody. And a lot of times when people are having emotional experiences like that, it's because they care about the person. The person's right there and they're going through something, or something's happening. And if you can't have emotional balance, you can't be helpful. And then you have more problems. And so recovery is really about, we get to show up, and that's the showing up, is that we get a proper display of emotions. We get to pause and not react. And in that, then we get to be helpful, and we're helpful. And then we're not struggling, like we can have life experience and unfold and be stable. And that's the attraction to me, is like the ability to go through problems that even normal people, they don't know what they're doing. And we get a kind of a direction on how to navigate that. And there's an attractiveness even to people who aren't in recovery that ask me, how are you doing this? You know, church people have asked me, how did you recover? How can you keep in? It's like, well, I just did the steps. And it sounds so silly, and the steps get a bad reputation, but you know, we are the evidence and the selling feature of this. And so I really believe in the attraction versus promotion, because it's been happening for me. And I don't know, I just think that we have such a gift, and I see it working, and it makes me believe in it so much more in working with others. And so if the person isn't working with others, they're missing like a great majority of what this stuff is all about. Because you can't see it in yourself. A lot of times you can kind of see it, but you can really see it in other people. And that has helped me to believe in a higher power more and more and more. And a lot of my faith has come through witnessing this happen for other people. And I'm like, wow, this is like, they're not faking it, you know?
Amazing. Okay.
It's amazing when he actually lets me talk and listen. Like, whoa.
Fill up. What's the thing? Lessons from alcohol. From him?
Shut up, Paul.
You don't need help.
Okay. Are you going to keep reading, or am I?
An illness of this sort, as we have come to believe it is an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferer. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole department shouts at the new prospect, that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatsoever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up the beds and walk again.
Okay, back to the top of 18. I love how Bill writes this. An illness of this sort, hyphen, and we have come to believe it is an illness. Kind of like what I was alluding to earlier was many people don't believe this is an illness. They haven't come to believe in their innermost self that they are different, right? And people that haven't gone through this material and they just try to get sober through the psychologist and the psychiatrist or whatever, they don't really understand the depth of the illness. So they haven't come to believe that they have an illness. And as we keep moving through the study and through our own recoveries, we come in here and sure, we can admit the obsession, I guess, and then we can kind of maybe agree with the allergy. It explains many things which we cannot otherwise account. But as you stay around here longer and you get past those two things, you start seeing there's much more to this illness than the allergy and the obsession. It's like the spiritual malady. It's the resentment. It's the judgment. It's the sex. It's the relationships. It's the defective character, right? The defective character drives this illness. And if I don't get a handle on this defective character, then I will pick up a drink again. Or I live very discontented and miserable. And I try to seek other methods of relief, right? Because the ego wants relief. So we have to come to believe we have the illness. And that's why a lot of people are here, right? You guys know you have the illness. Now let's get deeper into what it really is, the spiritual malady. The book talks about when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So when I work on the spiritual component of a spiritual illness, then I straighten out mentally and I straighten out physically. Janine alluded to in her last share about the balance of being able to handle things, right? Because the mind, when it's not well, it strikes emotions and then we go into like reaction mode or whatever it is, right? But when we can bring God in, when we're working on that spiritual component, everything else just lines up. And I'll say that the physical part of this, where we want to take care of our bodies, we want to take care of our health, and that part comes down the road, right? So as we work out our solution on the spiritual, then the mental starts to calm down. We're able to handle things. And then later we're like, I want to take care of my body. I want to start working out. I want to do these things. I want to connect with the land. I want to start hiking, right? But I think what a lot of people do, men are especially subject to this, is they go and work on the body first. They're working out and they're doing all these things and they want to look good for the women. And then the spiritual goes to the side and the mental's not really well yet. And then they end up relapsing because it's all based in validation still, right? The workout part, right? They'll come in here and start doing the spiritual. And then the spiritual kind of takes them to the next stage, but they don't really work on the mental, which is, you know, the defective character. And they work on the physical and then they're relapsed again. So that's important. If a person has cancer, we're all sorry for them. No one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. So that's the little things. What gets annihilated? Think of that word. For me, it was jumping on the trampoline with my kids. It was going fishing. It was doing the simple things, watching hockey on a Saturday night, you know, hanging out with my family in the evening around a campfire in our backyard on the acreage, you know, maybe going for a bike ride or a walk down by the lake when I used to live in Chestermere, right? All those things were annihilated. Those are the things that made my life worthwhile, right? Maybe for some of you, it's drawing or playing music or, you know, whatever it is for you. Those things get annihilated, right? And for those who are sponsoring, this paragraph here is super important because what step one is actually trying to do, step one is a low vibrating step. It's actually designed in the book to humble you, to make you feel the pain. And as you go through this piece right here, you take these lines and you ask that person, okay, what was annihilated in your life? And you share your experiences. And then, you know, dig some out of them. It engulfs all those who touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment. Ask them, who were you resentful at? Who was resentful at you? Who did you engulf in your addiction? What kind of things happened in your life to burn it down? And how angry were people with you? Because honestly, the people don't really want to talk about how mad people are at them, but it's really important to bring this up so that they feel that pain, right? This is designed to feel the pain. Anyone who's worked with Jesse, they know the pain of what this process does. Jesse's an expert at bringing this step one, humility, the pain and suffering, out of the guys that he works with. Okay? Hey, Andrew. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers. Who wants to talk about disgusted friends that you've really harmed, that they think you're just a piece of shit? That's important for us to talk about as you take somebody through this material so they feel that pain. Okay, I'm gonna quickly go down.
I just need to say something.
Go for it.
Because so there's times when people need to be built back up. Like if I'm working with somebody who's just so broken. And this paragraph has actually been used in my world more to build someone up a little bit so that they can carry on in sobriety and not take themselves out with their own self-pity and their own pain. Because, you know, what this is talking about, even the paragraphs after where it says alcoholics aren't going to talk to people who, like even the doctors, because it's hard, you can't explain it. Like if as he was reading this, I was thinking of this time I was over top of my sink and I was trying to get ready for work and I was puking and then nothing was coming up and I was like dry heaving and it was just like saliva. And my son came up, he must have been, I don't even know, he was in elementary still. He's like, Mom, what's wrong? And I was like shaking and I was like I'm like, oh, I just gagged on the toothbrush or whatever. And like, I remember thinking like, what am I doing? Like, I am such a pathetic mess. Like, what am I like? And I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't stop drinking and like trying to explain those moments to a doctor. He's not going to get it. Like all of you would get it from me just saying that. Like, you know, your kids are standing on the stairs and you're not functioning. And I was shaking, and the amount of anxiety in that moment is just like that stuff. I can't accurately even like explain. I don't need to accurately explain it. I can give you just the little synopsis there and everybody's like, yep, yeah, oh yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I don't even need to get into it. Like the terror in that moment and the anxiety that was through the roof and my son's face, you guys all get it, you know, but trying to communicate that to a doctor, I think it's like, I know that I tried to communicate and then immediately I felt misunderstood, judged, whatever that was, and then I just don't even bother because it's futile. It's like, why am I even explaining? Because this person isn't going to get it and they're going to give me a bunch of shit that I don't believe in, that I know that isn't going to solve my problems because I've probably tried it. And so the same with the friends and the partners. Like I laugh at this where it's like, strangely enough, wives and parents and all these people close to us, like, what do you mean strangely? They're pissed right off. I'm not telling them the truth. But strangely enough, we don't talk to them either. But the ex-problem drinker, they understand, and you don't even got to get into it. And so it's so much easier to talk about the things that we've never talked about because we don't got to barely talk about it. And then I think in that we get the hang of talking about it, because it starts with just a couple of phrases and someone's like, I totally get it. And you know that they do. And so I think for me, some of that has been part of my ability to process it, is that I didn't really know until I started talking about it with another alcoholic. And then I could really sort it out for myself too, but it had to be with somebody who totally knew my experience. And yeah, so sometimes more than using it to break somebody, I use it to build them back up, where I say, hey, I get it. Like, I know the total annihilation where it's like, you're annihilating everything worthwhile in your life and you can't stop. And the pain that comes from that can sometimes be what keeps somebody stuck and unable to get sober. And so sometimes they just need some validation that, you know, it's going to be okay. I know that pain and it's okay for me. and I'm over that pain now. Things got better if you just stay sober and you just toe the line and just do what this book tells us to do, and it'll be better for you too.
More amazingness. No, that was fucking great. But what I would like to say also on that is, as you sponsor, she's right. You can't just take people down, right? There's a balance to this. And learning how to balance that and use the humility and the pain and then building them back up, and kind of, it's like a back and forth thing. And depending on what type of alcoholic you're working with will depend on how some of that is used as well. But that only comes through the experience of working with many different types of people. And then you start connecting more. The more you work with people, the more you connect with God, the more you connect with yourself, and the better you can draw on intuitive thought and inspiration and in all of this of what we're talking about, right? And a lot of, I guess, I don't know, probably more women are.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a gender difference as well.
Yeah.
Probably with some of this.
Right. So her experience is more that because the women are however they are, and a lot of the guys that I work with or that, you know, are out there, they need a little bit of a beat down, right? Balanced beat down, right?
I think some of that too has to do with a lot of women are mothers, and there's a difference in that too. There's a tenderness around that just men don't have the same maternal kind of thing going on.
Roger. So, and then I'm just going to quickly go down, but the ex-problem drinker has found the solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So in the allergy and the obsession and the spiritual malady, as you kind of talk about succumbing to the desire, not being able to stay stopped, when you put it in your body, you have little control in the amount you take. When you're first approaching somebody new, all of that stuff's really important because it starts making sense to him, right? Yeah, I've tried to stop too, and you share your experience of trying to stop putting one drink in your body, because a lot of people think it's like the 10th drink, right? When you can kind of articulate that, no, it was the first drink, and then you kind of show them in your life how that actually transpired into like 25 drinks and fucking on the streets or in jail or whatever, right? They start going, yeah, okay, that makes good sense. But, you know, to the other part of the illness, the ex-problem drinker has found the solution. I can share my defective character of anger and lust and porn and gambling and relationships and judgment. I can really share that stuff and the person can relate too, right? But as you're introducing yourself to some of these new people, or you meet somebody kind of not even in the program, you can win their entire confidence in a few hours. Like, it honestly doesn't take me long. I meet people all the time that know nothing about this illness, and then within an hour or two, they want to know more. They're coming to a meeting because it's really, you get good at this, right? You get good at being able to connect with them, right? That the man, here we go, that the man who is making the approach would be me or you. If you're in the rooms, hopefully if you're in the rooms, you're going to meet the newcomer. You're going to say hi to them. And it takes time, right? You got to sometimes say hi to somebody 15 times before they say hi back. You know, maybe it's out on the patio having a smoke, you know, at halftime or on the step. And then finally they start talking to you. But that's what this takes. It takes consistent, persistent commitment to engage with these people because they're very insecure and they're shy and they're fearful and they're embarrassed. And like, for you to accept them and make them feel welcomed over time, it'll break them out of their shell. So I implore anybody here who's trying to work with alcoholics or learn how to get good at this, keep talking to people, keep saying hi to them. Just say hi. If that's all it takes. And you know, that's you guys know me. I say hi to everybody. I always want to talk to people. I'll sit out in front of the meeting and wait for the treatment van to show up, right? And I'll say hi to all those guys because it's important, man. They need that. They want that. And if you don't, they'll judge you. But if you're nice to them, they quit judging. Right? I know that for a fact. So he has the same difficulty. I have all the same difficulties as him. And I obviously know what I'm talking about. His whole deportment shouts at the new prospect. He is the man with the real answer. Whole deportment is the body energy. All parts of that being somebody who's recovered, when they share from the podium or they're sharing or they're walking with that confidence, their whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's the man with the real answer. And when you're really passionate about this, if it changed your life so much, or if you see enough people die who don't get it, it really inspires you to carry that message strong. A lot of people wonder why I'm kind of like the way I am. If you've seen enough death like I have, then you'll understand why. And some guys that I work with, new sponsees, they're like, I wish I could have more of like that conviction you have. Well, 3 years later, they have the conviction. Why? Because they've been around and some of their sponsees have died and people die. It gives you more conviction. And if you see what works, this program, and you see what doesn't work, fucking around, then you're really more inspired to be in the literature and sharing these experiences. Has a no attitude, holier than thou, nothing but ever with a sincere desire to be helpful. There are no fees to pay. Well, there are kind of fees to pay, okay? The fees to pay are being of service, going to meetings, not going to meetings to take, going to meetings to share your experience, and praying before you share that somebody might hear something, and sponsoring and service. And these are the fees that we pay. No lectures to be endured. Well, I don't know, sometimes there is, depending on who's sharing. These are the conditions we have found most helpful. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. That's it.
Why do you get me to read it if you're just going to reread it? Well, I was really wondering. I'm like, we just fucking read that. All right. So do you want to read? Yeah. All right. So none of us make a sole vacation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all of their time to the work. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we enjoyed. How shall we present that which has been given so freely to us?
Do you want to go first?
You go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to reread what she just read. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Okay? The elimination of the drink is the beginning. It's the first milestone on the new road that we're walking. And you'll notice Bill W. style, he kind of punches home that same statement again here a little further down. But just for anyone maybe on Zoom or who's here, the problem isn't really drinking. It's thinking, okay? It's our emotions. It's how we view life. And when we put the drink down, that's just the very fucking beginning. A much more important demonstrations of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. It's way more important for me to practice this way of life, not here, out there, at home, at work, and everywhere in my life. That's where the real challenge is. It's easy to put on the mask here and do it here, right? But doing it out there with your spouse, doing it out there with your boss who's an asshole, doing it out there with people who are trying to mind and emotionally manipulate you or other people, and watching this go on with other people and praying for them and doing all the things that we do. It's hard to do that out there. But that's the willingness and honesty. Try repeatedly step 6 on all your faults. But you got to be aware. Without the awareness of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, nothing changes. So you got to be aware first. Once the awareness is there, then willingness kicks in, and honesty and open-mindedness. Those ones are indispensable, right? Like the book says. Next paragraph. If we keep on the way we are going, there's little doubt that much good will result. So if we keep on the way we're going drinking, nothing good happens. If we keep on the way we're going in the defective character, in judgment, anger, and the way we treat people, intimate relationships, and ourselves, a lot of this is how we treat ourselves too. If we keep doing that, not much good is going to result either. And that's where people kind of miss the boat. They don't focus on their defective character and bringing God in, and they stay miserable. A lot of people come and try to get sober and they don't get happy. They white knuckle their whole life sobriety, and they keep trying to grab at things to make them better, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But the surface of the problem would hardly have been scratched. Those of us who live in large cities like us are overcome by the reflection that close by thousands are dropping into oblivion every day. We all know that. We see people all around us dropping into oblivion every day. And we see them because they're around us. But what about all the ones we don't see? Like there's so many people that are just dying from this illness, right? They say COVID was a killer, right? There's more people dying from drug and alcohol addiction and spiritual malady than any COVID, right? This is way more important. And I wish our governments and society would get in tune with this, because they could stop it, they could change it, they could do something. But our society's sick in its own right. There's a lot of sickness in the society we live in. And I'm saying the governments and the mental health and our health systems, and I could go into a whole gamut of this kind of shit, but I don't. But many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. So when I work with somebody and they come into the program and they're like so defeated that they have to come here, like this is such a burden in their lives, they're forced to come here to recovery. I'm like, dude, this isn't a life sentence. You don't know that you just got the jackpot of life. Like Janine had talked about earlier. How lucky am I to have this? I spent my whole life suffering, trying to find happiness and money and shiny things and all this stuff. And I come here and I got to do these steps and work these steps in my life at a certain level. And my life's never been better. How lucky am I? So showing people how lucky they are to maybe have finally gotten to this point. Like I know I was talking with Chris here recently, and you know, I'm just going to share something if you don't mind. He was saying like he knows that it's this program and his relationship with God of himself. He can't do what's being done, right? And it's a gift, because living like that is so terrible in our own minds. We don't want to hurt people. We don't want to be that kind of parent. I never wanted to do those things, but I didn't know how not to. And then I come here and I find a blueprint that I can live my life. And I know that of myself, I can't do that. And that was our conversation. Of myself, I cannot be this person. But through this program and through my relationship with God, I can be the best person I've ever been. The only requirement is that I keep an attitude of gratitude, an attitude of God in my life. So when people, you can switch them right in that moment from it's a life sentence to like, maybe this is something really cool that I don't understand yet. And then I'll finish with this. When I sponsor people, and we get to this last line on this paragraph, it's then how then shall we present that is which been so freely given to us? And I ask them because it's a question mark there. And if I've done my job right as a sponsor, this is just for me, they'll answer, I pass this on to other people. And almost always for me, they answer that question, because I'm so adamant going through the beginning parts of this book that that's a really important part of this.
Do you tell them about step 6?
I tell them about a lot of shit. That's it.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, I don't know what you were mentioning there, but, oh yeah, government's being sick and this and that. I was just thinking about, there's been a couple of doozies this last couple months where there's been somebody with significant amounts of time doing some really next level fuckery. And so this idea that, oh my God, this person is 50, whatever years sober, and it's the old timers and all, like, I think that that's a dangerous attitude to have. And that just because a person has quality of time or quantity of time doesn't mean that they have anything that anybody should be having. And so to really listen to the message and match it up to the book is kind of what I try and do. And then you just intuitively can discern, you know, some things, but I really, there's been some disturbing things. So the quantity of time means nothing. And the message should be, people get mad at me for saying this, but you look it up in the book, make sure you cross-reference this in the book, make sure that you don't just take it like there's lots of things that go on in the rooms that are not Alcoholics Anonymous. They're opinions and they're dangerous, and just like people are sick, and just because they have a quality of time, just because they're government, just because they're in a position of power, just because doesn't mean that everybody's spiritually fit. And doesn't mean that everybody, like, I don't believe that people maliciously try to hurt. With all that being said, I think that sometimes people just don't know that they're as ill as they are. But working with people, like, girls come and they're just, oh, the newcomer, and they go into rooms and they hear these messages and they idolize people with so much time. And so just as of recently, I've been really saying, like, be careful, you know. I used to stay out of it, but everybody will figure it out on their own time. But there's just been a couple of weird things that I don't say that anymore. I say, like, really be careful of the messages that you're getting, because quantity isn't quality. And not everybody carries the message of Alcoholics Anonymous in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, and on that note, time is important also, right? But it is very important to understand that a lot of people with time in don't have quality recovery. And just because they have the time, like she said, don't just put them on that pedestal, because my opinion, most old timers don't even really know the fucking book.
That's what I was trying not to say. I was struggling with what I was saying because I'm like, oh, I don't. Thank you.
And I love old timers, a lot of them, but a lot of them don't know what's in the book. It's like that moral and philosophical convictions galore. And if the rates of the program were what we read earlier, 50% got sober at once, 25% with some relapses, and the other 25% a better quality of life, why is there only like one old timer at every group with 30 years? Shouldn't it be like 5 or 10 old timers? Shouldn't it be like 5 or 10 guys with 25 years and 30 years, but it's only one or maybe two. So I think what's really important is we carry this message now, and the birthday boards I'm starting to notice have 1111, 222, 333, 444, 555 years. And hopefully those numbers transcend, because I believe that the program is really being instilled in a lot of people because of this kind of thing. And because of the sponsorship that is quality out of the book, not just somebody answering a phone saying, oh, you know what? You know, I'm going to co-sign your shit. You should feel like that. You are the victim. You know what? That guy's an asshole. No, man, that's not about that. The book's very clear on what we do, right? But healing only happens through time. As you get into your first and second year, there's a lot of doing, staying busy, hitting meetings, doing some inventory. There's a lot of doing. You're starting to learn how to sponsor. Once you hit into like year 3 and 4, it has to change, because a lot of the woundedness and some of the grief and guilt and shame, it starts to come up. Okay. And then at 4, 5, 6, and 7 years, it changes more. So your recovery has to kind of ebb and flow, and you got to be ready for the change. And if you just keep the doing part and you're not keeping really a clean house and you're just living your program with the best of intention, when that deep rooted stuff starts coming up, you're not really ready for it. And watch for this. Watch for people that are 3, 4, 5 years sober and they start going batshit crazy because they're not doing their inventory. They're not doing the spiritual disciplines. They're not working with others. And then they're like hitting these walls. So you got to be like growing with your recovery, and it takes time also. So time is important also, right? That's it.